Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we discuss if Ashton Jeanty was robbed of the Heisman Trophy. So, as you guys know, Travis Hunter won the Heisman Trophy on Saturday night, and this is something that I thought was going to happen. I was not surprised when this happened because if you followed like all of the betting markets like I had been, Travis Hunter for several weeks now was a overwhelming favorite. He was like minus 600, minus 700, minus 800. And for people that don't bet, basically what that means is he was such a heavy favorite, it really wasn't even worth betting any money on it because you wouldn't get much back or you wouldn't get much of a return. So the reason we were talking about this is after all of the votes came out for this Heisman race, this was one of the closest Heisman races that we have had in recent memory. I'll go ahead and show you guys this tweet here that kind of shows you how close the Heisman Trophy race was. I believe the last time that this was that close. Hold on, let me zoom out a little bit. Because this is from Adam Schefter. Heisman Trophy voting results with the smallest margin of victory since 2009. As you guys can see there, even though Travis Hunter got a lot more of the first place votes here, like 143 or 243 more first place votes, the total points that were tallied up between the two was a lot closer. It was 214 points of a difference, which is the smallest margin of victory since 2009, which I believe that was the Mark Ingram, Toby Gerhart season. So in this video here today, I'm going to point out how Travis Hunter won the Heisman, and then I'm also going to talk about the reasons why Ashton Jeanty did not win the Heisman. I want to say before I get into all of that stuff, though, both of them had phenomenal seasons and had iconic seasons that are going to be remembered for a very, very long time. Both of them are going to have successful NFL careers, and both of them are phenomenal, fantastic football players. I'm not going to be tearing any one of them down in this video. So first off, let's start with this. Let's start with the Travis Hunter stats. And I'm going to go ahead too, and I'm going to tell you his stats as a wide receiver. And then I'm going to defend him winning the Biletnikoff because a lot of people were freaking out over the Biletnikoff, the fact that he won that. So his receiving grade was 7th in all of college football, according to Pro Football Focus. He was number 2 in college football in receiving touchdowns. He was 6th in the country in receiving yards with 1,152. Also, he had 14 receiving touchdowns, if I didn't say that. He also was 5th in college football in receptions with 92. He had 7 100-yard games, and that's just him as a receiver. So the reason I'm going to defend him with the Biletnikoff here for a second, because a lot of people are freaking out about that because there's this kid from San Jose State, which apparently a bunch of people on Twitter were San Jose State fans and have been grinding their tape all year. Nick Nash, who, congrats to him, he had a tremendous season. He was a first-team All-American that was announced today at the wide receiver position, but Travis Hunter won the award, and people were freaking out because Nick Nash had more receiving yards, he had more receptions, and he had more touchdowns. People are like, what are you talking about? I thought we were supposed to care about stats, bro. And the thing that really irritated me about this is if you have been paying attention to college football awards, and specifically this award, stats matter. Obviously, stats matter, but how a lot of these awards come, guys, how these are made and how we decide them is not because of stats. We factor in stats, but we don't just put everything into a calculator and grade it out that way. And we say, aha, that guy wins, or aha, that guy wins. That's not how this stuff works. It has never been how this stuff works. And if you were mad about Travis Hunter winning the Biletnikoff this year, one, can you name me the last 2 Biletnikoff winners? Can you? Because if you did, you should even be way, way, way more outraged at the last 2 Biletnikoff winners, Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee and Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State, because Travis Hunter and how he ranked compared to them comparatively to college football, like both of those guys, I think they both actually had 67 receptions in their respective seasons where they won the Biletnikoff. Now, I know Oregon fans were mad that Troy Franklin didn't win over Marvin Harrison Jr. because he had better stats than him. But that's not what the award is. It's not a stat award. You can complain about it, But if you're going to be mad about Travis Hunter, and by the way, neither of those guys were even in the top 20 in receptions in their respective years when they won it, and they were not as high up on the touchdowns as Travis Hunter was in the ranking. So why were none of you guys getting so mad then? Why was there not this big outrage about those two guys winning the last 2 years? Why not? Where were you? I just wanted to point that out because that's something that made me very, very mad. So Travis Hunter, we're talking about him as a wide receiver. He's an All-American. He won the Biletnikoff. He's one of the best wide receivers in the country, whether you want to rank him top 3, 1, 5, wherever. He's without a doubt one of the best in the country. Okay. With that being said, too, he didn't win this award because he's an awesome wide receiver. He won it because he's also an incredible defensive back. He was number 3 among all cornerbacks in coverage grade, according to Pro Football Focus. He was number 3 among all cornerbacks in defensive grade. He had 4 interceptions. He only allowed 1 touchdown when he was guarding somebody one-on-one. I think he had God, I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I think it was like something like 12 passes defended this entire year. I'm sorry, that number might be off. But if you watched Colorado a lot this year, which I did, and I made this point earlier in the year, I made 2 points. We did a video, I think we did in September or October. And I basically made the point that I thought the best way for him to win the Heisman was that Colorado needed to win like 8 or 9 games this year, and they ended up winning 9. So I thought he was going to win it. I said, hey, if he's going to win 7, 6 games, which was where their kind of win total was supposed to be heading into the season, I thought it was going to be an uphill battle for him. So it's not the fact that like he just played a bunch of snaps. It's the fact that he played a bunch of snaps and was elite at both ends of the field when he played those snaps. Okay. And I do think people were kind of ripping the fact that like they showed like a stat on ESPN where it was like his total stats, and they're like, oh my God, they created a new stat because they want him to win. Ugh, you guys are idiots if you thought that. And I also think it's important to like point out how many snaps he has when it's so astronomically more than anyone else. And it's one of the most unique things we've ever seen in the sport, because we've had other guys in college football or even football play both sides of the ball. You know, you guys remember the years when like a defensive end is like all of a sudden having a year where they're competing for the Heisman. So the team like forces them to like, oh, we'll have them like play tight end for a play, or we'll have them be fullback and get a touchdown that way. And maybe that will help them win the Heisman. This is different than that. Travis was playing both sides of the ball. He was being phenomenal the entire year. And I also think another thing too is he was incredibly important for them winning football games this year. If you watch Colorado, and I did a video where I talked about how the reason Colorado was successful, and the biggest reason was they had Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. Those guys buoyed their team when they needed it. Because after the Nebraska game and everyone was writing Colorado off, if you look at kind of like the statistical reasons why Colorado had struggled under Deion to that point, it was because they were the worst rushing attack in all of college football, and they were one of the worst teams when it came to committing penalties in all of college football. If you look at them now, those things are still the same. They still can't run the ball, and they still commit a lot of penalties. The reason they won a lot of these games, and I know they kicked butt in a lot of these games, but the reason was because, or a big reason why, I should preface it that way because I don't want people to get mad at me, is because Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders would buoy their team when they needed it. The reason they won that Baylor game that prevented Baylor from, oddly enough, making the Big 12 championship game is Travis Hunter single-handedly won that game. He played phenomenally at receiver in that game, and then he also had the game-winning punch-out in overtime. He's a phenomenal player. He played elite at both sides of the ball, and that's something that we've never seen anyone do. We might never see anyone do that again. Okay, so that's kind of like the broad, take of why Travis Hunter won the Heisman Trophy, right? He's just a phenomenal football player, can play both sides of the ball. There's a argument now, should he be receiver, should he be cornerback in the NFL? I think he needs to pick one because the NFL's a much longer season, and just playing both sides of the ball with bigger, stronger, faster guys, I think it'd be smarter for him to pick a side, even though it seems like he doesn't want to do that, but we'll digress from that point. So let's get to Ashton Jeanty here. Ashton Jeanty, all-time great running back season. all-time great running back season. He had 2,497 rushing yards, 29 rushing touchdowns, 30 overall touchdowns if you count receiving touchdowns, and he had 300, did I write that right? 344 carries. He was phenomenal. Haters would probably say that he stat padded. If you actually watched Boise State and you watched them play the entire year, or even if I was going back through some of their box scores today, like Jeanty doesn't have any of those games where he's like scoring a touchdown with 54 seconds left, right? Like they needed him to have a lot of carries for them to be successful, and I think it really played out that way if you watch the Mountain West Championship. But let's talk about this, because this has been a point that some people have been bringing up to kind of not tear down Jeanty, but maybe to add more context to it, where we've seen a lot of running backs before have insane years where they're getting a bunch of rushing yards and they're getting a bunch of touchdowns. But if you really look at it, a lot of times those guys don't win the Heisman Trophy. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this stat right now. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. This is because a lot of people have been pulling out like the Melvin Gordon thing, and they've been comparing that to Ashton Jeanty, but they haven't been factoring in the bowl game that Melvin Gordon played in. So these are, you guys can see it on your screen now. These are the players to rush for over 2,100 yards without bowl stats. Okay, so what does that mean? That means this is their stat when the Heisman Trophy got announced. This is their total rushing yards when the Heisman Trophy got announced. Okay. And by the way, Barry Sanders, the first one here, 26-28, 2,628 yards. He did that in 11 games. I looked that up again today. He did that in 11 games. That's absolutely insane. Then you have Ashton Jeanty here, who is second. You have Kevin Smith, who got 2,448 rushing yards for UCF. Marcus Allen had 342 rushing yards for USC. He won the Heisman. Okay, Kevin Smith did not win the Heisman. Melvin Gordon, who we were just talking about, 2,336 rushing yards for Wisconsin, did not win the Heisman. Troy Davis, 2,185 rushing yards for Iowa State, 1996. Funny thing about that year, I know this because I'm an Iowa State fan. Iowa State won like 2 games that year. And I think he finished top 5 in the Heisman, if I remember correctly, but obviously didn't win because they won 2 games. LT, 2,158, did not win the Heisman. Mike Rozier, 2,148, won the Heisman. Matt Forte, 21-27. He didn't even get top 10 Heisman votes, Matt Forte. Ricky Williams, 98, 21-24, did win the Heisman. And then Andre Williams, 2,102, did not win the Heisman. Looking at that, guys that got over 2,100 yards, only 4 of these 11 guys ended up winning the Heisman. And I want to point this out here too. If you look at all of these guys here, Ashton Jeanty, smaller school, not a Power 5 school, Power 4 school. Same thing with Kevin Smith. Same thing with LaDainian Tomlinson, because TCU was, I don't know what conference they were in 2000, but it was not a power conference. Same thing with Matt Forte, Tulane. Those are guys that had really good seasons, but probably weren't considered as highly for the Heisman Trophy or other awards because they played at G4, G5 schools, or whatever you want to call them at that time. And I honestly think that's the biggest reason why he didn't win. When I look at all the stats that he had and how close that the voting was, I really think it's that. I really think it's because he played at Boise State, because there's probably some people that probably unfairly criticized or not criticized, but didn't take Jeanty's Heisman case seriously because he was doing that at Boise State. And we're looking at some of those other guys like Melvin Gordon or who are some of the other names that we had on there? Melvin Gordon and, Andre Williams, whatever you want to say. But a lot of people brought up Monte Ball in previous years. Jonathan Taylor also had an amazing season at Wisconsin. All those Wisconsin, that three-headed monster of the Wisconsin running backs of the past 15 years, all of those guys had incredible seasons, and they did that in the Big Ten, and they didn't even get as much consideration for the Heisman Trophy. So I think there's some people that are looking at Ashton Jeanty and are like, well, what would have happened if he would have played in the Big Ten? And obviously, I do think this too. If he put up these same exact stats and he was at Oregon, or if he put up those same exact stats and he was at an SEC school, he probably would have won it. But, and this isn't a knock on Jeanty, if he's playing on those teams, they're probably not using him in that way. He's probably not getting 344 carries in 13 games. He's just not. And I think that's the biggest reason why he didn't win it, is because he plays in the Mountain West. And even though he had a great year, even though they needed all 344 of those carries, I think that's the biggest reason why he didn't win, because the voting was that close. And maybe if he was in a power conference and even if he didn't have those numbers, let's say he had 90% of those numbers, 80%, I don't know what 80% would be. Let's say 85% of those numbers, maybe the touchdowns are the same, but just the yards are lower, attempts are lower too, obviously. Maybe he gets it, but the running back position with Heisman Trophy, very underappreciated. We don't want to give him that award. And it's just kind of a thing that happens. And also, too, I was going through, because we're wrapping up here in a second. I was going through a lot of those like really good running back seasons. And the reason a lot of those like really good running back seasons, when you go through, and those guys that had legendary running back seasons ended up not winning the Heisman, you're like, how did they not do that? It's usually because there was like a quarterback in one of those years that had like an all-time great quarterback season. So, for example, the Melvin Gordon one, that was the Marcus Mariota Heisman. And Marcus Mariota, even though we probably don't look at him as fondly now as we did in 2013 or whenever that was, 14, we don't look at him as fondly as we do now, or as fondly then as we do now, is because obviously his pro career didn't pan out. But in like college football circles, when people talk about like the greatest quarterback seasons of all time, Marcus Mariota's season, rightly or wrongly, is put in those conversations. So I think that's why he didn't win, or obviously that's why he didn't win that year. But yeah, that's basically it, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think Ashton Jeanty should have won? Do you think Travis Hunter should have won? Arizona State fans, where are you at? You calling out Cam Scadaboo? He should have won, or at least had more consideration. That's going to do it for this video here today. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't done so already, it's the number one thing you could do to help support the show, and it costs you absolutely $0. And feel free to check out other content on this page, and we'll talk to you next time. Talk to you later.